Hello and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. Thanks so much for listening. We're so excited to have acclaimed journalist and writer Ta-Nehisi Coates with us. Coates is a national correspondent for The Atlantic. In 2008, he wrote The Beautiful Struggle, A Father, Two Sons, and an Unlikely Road to Manhood. His second book, Between the World and Me, was released in 2015, has been hailed as required reading by Toni Morrison, and earned him a MacArthur Genius Grant. Now, you will definitely want to read this book, Between the World and Me. And you can not only get a copy of this book, but support the Katie Halper Show by making a donation. For $120, you get Between the World and Me. And an even better deal is if you pledge $150, you'll get Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, but you'll also get Johann Hari's book, Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs. We're going to be bringing you an interview with Johann Hari on November 4th. And just so you know a little bit about Johann Hari's book and how great it is, Glenn Greenwald called it the perfect antidote to the war on drugs. Bill Maher called it a terrific book. Naomi Klein called it superb journalism and thrilling storytelling. Noam Chomsky called it wonderful. I couldn't put it down. Amy Goodman called it an astounding book. Just call 212-209-2950, 212-209-2950. And all you have to do when you call is you say you're giving a donation to support the Katie Halper Show and that you would like either Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me, or you want the book package, which will give you both Ta-Nehisi Coates' book and Johann Hari's book, Chasing the Scream. Or go to give.FwdRad.io. That's give, then the number 2, FwdRad.io. And search for Ta-Nehisi Coates, or search for Johann Hari, and both of those will come up. And it's because we want to bring you great shows without annoying advertising and without annoying things like interruptions like these, asking you for money, that we're asking you to support the show. Now, maybe $150, $120 is a little steep for you. We feel you. But you still want to support the Katie Halper Show, right? And you still want to get something great out of it? Awesome. Go to the same website or call for the comedy bundle to support the Katie Halper Show. Pay $50. It's ridiculous. It shouldn't be this cheap at all. It may have been a mistake when we were registering it. It should have been way more. You get a comedy DVD from Julie Goldman, a comedy DVD from Ted Alexandro. Ted Alexandro, just so you know, opened for Louis C.K. at Carnegie Hall. Comedy DVD from Justin Williams. And you get an amazing musical comedy CD from the Chalks. Want to make a smaller donation? That's fine. You just go to the same website, call the same number, and you tell them you want to make a donation to the Katie Halper Show and you want this amazingly funny musical comedy CD from the Christian country band The Chalks called 3 Girls, 3 Guitars, 3 Chords. It's $30. When you go to give to WBAI.org, just search for Chalks, CHALKS, and that'll come up. Search for comedy bundle and the other thing will come up. Let's say you already donated, but you still want to support the Katie Halper Show in a way that requires no money. Great news, you can. Please, please, please subscribe to us on iTunes. And then rate us and review us. Rate us and review us. You please just give us a review. It could be 2 words, hopefully 7 or something, maybe even 12 words, who knows. Rate us, give us a couple stars, hopefully 5, but we'll take whatever. See you next week when we'll be talking to Johann Hari. Hello, this again is the Katie Halper Show. Thanks so much for listening. Pretty soon, Ta-Nehisi Coates is going to be calling in.
Wow.
We're going to play a little excerpt of his book, Between the World and Me, which is, again, that is the book that we are offering you guys, okay? Between the World and Me. We are offering you this book.
I was not jailed. I had proven to myself that there was another way beyond the schools and the streets. I felt myself to be among the survivors of some great natural disaster, some plague, some avalanche or earthquake. And now, living in the wake of a decimation and having arrived at a land that I once considered mythical, everything seemed cast in a halo. The pastel Parisian scarves burned brighter. The morning odor wafting out of the boulangeries was hypnotic. And the language all around me struck me not so much as language, but as dance. Your route will be different. It must be. You knew things at 11 that I did not know when I was 25. When I was 11, my highest priority was the simple security of my body. My life was the immediate negotiation of violence within my house and without. But already you have expectations. I see that in you. Survival and safety are not enough. Your hopes, your dreams, if you will, leave me with an array of warring emotions. I am so very proud of you, your openness, your ambition, your aggression, your intelligence. My job, in the little time we have left together, is to match that intelligence with wisdom. Part of that wisdom is understanding what you were given, a city where gay bars are unremarkable, a soccer team on which half the players speak some other language. What I am saying is that it does not all belong to you, that the beauty in you is not strictly yours and is largely the result of enjoying an abnormal amount of security in your black body. Perhaps that is why when you discovered that the killer of Michael Brown would go unpunished, you told me you had to go. Perhaps that is why you are crying, because in that moment you understood that even your relatively privileged security can never match a sustained assault launched in the name of the dream. Our current politics tell you that should you fall victim to such an assault and lose your body, it somehow must be your fault. Trayvon Martin's hoodie got him killed. Jordan Davis's loud music did the same. John Crawford should never have touched the rifle on display. Jimmy Powell should have known not to be crazy. And all of them should have had fathers. Even the ones who had fathers. Even you. Without its own justification, the dream would collapse upon itself.
Hello, this again is the Katie Halper Show. Thanks so much for listening. And we're so thrilled to have with us the genius, literally the genius. Not just me saying that. It's also the MacArthur Grant saying that. Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming.
Not quite a genius yet.
You don't like when people say genius, you don't turn your head?
I when it's said ironically, it's fine, but any degree of earnestness added to that makes my skin crawl.
You see, not just genius, ladies and gentlemen, but humble. He wins the Katie Halper Award for humility.
He's a humble genius.
Humble genius. Oh, that should be the name of your next.
I like that.
Humble genius.
I like
great.
that. Humble genius.
HGs.
But someone else HGs. But someone else will have to write it because obviously.
Right.
But you are here. We're so grateful to have you. I just want to introduce you to two people in the room with me. Gabe Pacheco, who's a co-host. Gabe Pacheco is from DC.
Hi, Ta-Nehisi.
Hi.
Happy to be here.
Huge fan of your book. I just want you to know because you'll be hearing different voices. So now you'll know who Gabe is. And now Reggie Johnson on the.
Well, yeah, I'm the engineer. You know, Ta-Nehisi, I actually remembered you. You wrote when you were still writing for the Village Voice, and we actually interviewed you back during the days of Wake Up Call back in the early aughts of the decade.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and you wrote an article about Russell Simmons and about branding and stuff like that, and immediately I was a fan of your stuff since then.
Okay.
Love at first sight. So, Ta-Nehisi, you're headed to France, but you're actually talking to us from California, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in San Francisco right now.
And what are you doing there?
Book touring.
Nice.
Oh, this is a stop, yeah.
And how's it going?
I think it's going all right. I'm probably going out, but it's okay.
Yeah. Well,
That's what it is, right?
Right. And when do you go to France? And can you tell us what you will be doing there?
I'm going back November 19th, and I'll be living in France. That's what I'll be doing in France.
Nice. That's very French. Enjoying it. Just being present. Being present. Now, I want to ask you something. You, of course, as many people have talked about this honor, Toni Morrison said that she'd been wondering, quote, who might fill the intellectual void that plagued me after James Baldwin died. Clearly, it is Ta-Nehisi Coates. The language of Between the World and Me, like Coates' journey, is visceral, eloquent, and beautifully redemptive, and its examination of the hazards and hopes of black male life is as profound as it is revelatory. This is required reading. So my question to you is, which was more exciting for you, to be praised by Toni Morrison or criticized by David Brooks?
Oh, of course to be praised by Toni Morrison. That's not even close.
All right. I just had to ask because I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure who had more intellectual heft and weight.
No.
No comparison. Not even right. Not even on a comedic level. We won't even go there. Right.
No.
Just making sure. Can you explain what that felt like when you heard about that, the Toni Morrison comment?
It was stunning. I mean, I didn't really know what to do. I mean, I don't, publicists try to get blurbs, and I hate blurbs. I hate blurbing, and I hate being blurbed. I don't generally like it. And, I did this book because it was so small, and really because it was so dear to me. I didn't want it festooned with blurbs. That was what they were going to do. And, when I, thought about it, when I talked to my editor, you come up with this list of dream blurbs, and, I was like, well, what if we just have one? And the two people who I wanted to do the one was either Toni Morrison or, Dr. O. Dr. O was too ill at the time to even read the book, unfortunately. But those are, two of my great literary lights. And so, they were the people I wanted talking about this book. We got other blurbs, and that was cool because that's what the publisher's supposed to do. As publishing is constructed right now. But when I saw that she actually did it, I was just, I was blown away.
Right.
I was completely blown away.
Now, I've been listening to a bunch of your interviews and speaking engagements and podcasts of you. And
a lot of them.
A lot. And congratulations, because I can't believe you're still standing. Although, for all I know, you're lying down.
Ever present.
Yes, ever present, omnipresent. And I'm kind of amazed by how much people demand or ask that you stand in for an entire kind of population. And how kind of, I'm not surprised that people expect that of you or hope that of you, because I think, as you referred to this in one of your responses to someone who was telling you that the narrative wasn't female enough, and you said, well, that just means that there need to be more narratives. And you weren't being dismissive. I thought that you handled that question. Yeah, but it does surprise me to the extent to which people are so open about that they kind of wear it on their sleeve, that they're demanding this from you. And I was wondering how you reconcile kind of your role as a writer, and you very much claim that title, rightly as you should, how you reconcile that with also not a responsibility, but you clearly are interested in your writing provoking something, correct? You say you're not an activist, that you're a writer, but you're...
Right. I hope people read it, and I hope they feel it. That's what I want. What I want is, people I write about, the ideas I write about, I want them to, lodge themselves within the, the midriff of the reader, and for the reader to, think about it when he or she goes to bed, wake up thinking about it, think about the next day, and think about it for as long as I can make them think about it.
Right.
You want to touch them. You want to, really get inside them. In terms of, people wanting you to do something beyond that and represent, I understand where that comes from, which is why I'm not dismissive. There's certainly, certain narratives, in our society that do not enjoy the same sort of prominence that other narratives I enjoy. The particular poignancy and pain, and a specific kind of plunder has been visited, upon Black women. Does not enjoy the visibility that it deserves. I understand that. I just don't think the way to do it is to, and we can go on. We can go on, through other experiences within, African American life. But I just don't think the way to do it is to pile all of that onto an 150-page book. I think you just need more books. That's what you do. You don't ask a book to stand in and speak for everything. I don't know how you write an entire book that covers the entirety, the nuance, the depth of the African American experience. I don't know how you do that.
Right. And then, of course, it becomes problematic if someone is speaking for other people, right?
Less so. I don't worry about that too much.
Oh, okay.
I really don't worry about that too much. I don't know that, you have to be a member of a group to, really articulate the kind of pain that group feels. I've learned a lot, about the African American experience, from white writers, to be honest, from white historians. So I wouldn't say that, but I do think that we need more books. We need more writers,
right.
Who can write those books. And probably most important of all, and this gets missed repeatedly, we need more editors. Who can who can greenlight the books and give the books the kind of attention that they need to bring them up to quality. And we just don't have that right now.
So when you say that you want the reader to think about your writing and think about it more the next day, what then, if you could live out a fantasy, right? And I know this is kind of an absurd question, but I think it's maybe related to reality on some level. What would they do with that after feeling it and thinking about it? Like, what would they go out and do? And I know that you're not saying that this is a manual for action or a manifesto.
Yeah. I can't really do that, though. You know what I mean? Like, that almost feels like a betrayal, because what you want is, what you're trying to achieve is a kind of liberation. You know what I mean? An intellectual independence, and you hope the book pushes people in that direction. just to be more critical about their will. Now, what they go and do, what policies they support, what they think needs to happen in the country. It almost feels like it would be a betrayal to work for me to tell them what that was. Because, especially between the world and me, it's very much about how I came to, to the way I saw things on my own, through my own exploration. And more than anything, like, that's what I'm promoting. I don't, want to say, the object is to get you to think like I think.
Right.
That feels like it limits the book.
So what about with something like the case for reparations? Now, that's clearly, this is this very seminal feature article that you wrote in 2014 in June for The Atlantic, and that was called The Case for Reparations, right? So there's a difference between journalism and memoir, right? Do you
right.
How do you kind of balance those two things, and how do you figure out what you want to pursue at what time?
It's whatever grabs me. It's like whatever really, really arrests me, whatever I'm excited by. And I was deeply, at the time I wrote that article, I was deeply, deeply excited about. It basically occurred to me that the reparations argument was correct. And that not only was it correct, more exciting to me was the fact that it could be made through the tools of journalism, by which I mean you could find living people, who you felt were owed reparations. And that I had never really seen, and that just, as a storytelling challenge, just totally exciting.
And so when you went into that article, what was your opinion of reparations? Or what was your analysis?
When I went to the article, that they were owed.
Okay, so at that point you had already, okay.
Yeah, by that point I believed it.
Do you remember your thinking before when you didn't believe it?
Yeah, I certainly do, yeah. I think like I was a much more standard, issue liberal, in the sense that I thought that, many of the problems in the African-American community, could be fixed by, class-based solutions. And then as increasingly, I saw more research around segregation, as I saw more research around community poverty, it became clear that, when people, that the black people themselves are a class in and of themselves. That one can't, sub in out, the black middle class and the white middle class. These are different groups of people, that racism itself is an injury. Not just a different kind of classism. That it is an injury in and of itself. That black poor people have been injured. That black middle class people have been injured. That black quote unquote rich people have been injured. In the way that like sexism injures women. You know what I mean? And it doesn't matter that some of those women are rich. Just being rich does not mean that you're not injured, or you can't be injured by sexism. When I could recognize that as an interest in and of itself. Well, that changed things.
And do you remember what made you realize that?
The research.
Okay.
The research. Yeah, just the research. Listen, once you get to the point that you realize that's not, and I think by the time I had come around, by the time I saw this statistic, but, this is one that just gets it across, very, very clearly for me. A sociologist down at NYU, Patrick Sharkey, did some research. And he was looking at what was called neighborhood poverty. And what that means is that regardless of whether, what the wealth or the income is for, an individual family, because people usually go family to family in terms of comparison. Well, folks have really started doing a sociology course, compare neighborhoods to neighborhoods, because you might have a relatively wealthy family and still have more exposure to neighborhood poverty than some other wealthy family because of where you live. So, one way to get this across is like, an average African-American family in America that, makes about $100,000 a year, and that's a good amount of money for a family in America, tends to live in the kind of neighborhood around the kind of poverty that a white family that makes $30,000 a year lives around. See, when you can see it like that, when you can begin to, really, see that, the acquisition of things, the acquisition of money, the acquisition of wealth really is not enough, to get you out. In fact, often what it does is actually paints a target on your back to be plundered.
Right.
And again, once I could see that, it was like, oh, wow, yeah.
I actually found it really interesting how in the reparations article you dealt with sort of something that seemed kind of benign on the surface, but just real estate as sort of the and how sort of predatory real estate and mortgage lending was towards the African American middle class. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that for any of the listeners that aren't quite familiar with that.
Sure. we built our middle class through housing. Period. I mean, that's just the facts of it. And it was through housing backed by social policy. During the 30s, 40s, into the 50s, through FHA loans, through the HOLC, Homeowners Loan Corporation, through the GI Bill. We basically went around the country and told banks that we would subsidize loans for people. One group of people we decided we did not do that for, and that was African Americans. And so this was considered, arguably the greatest wealth building opportunity, certainly the greatest subsidized wealth building opportunity in the 20th century. And black people were systematically cut out of it. And so the kind of, great distance and wealth that springs from that, and not just from the immediate process, but from, because, wealth compounds over the years, and from segregation and from being made vulnerable to, other forms of plunder through, illicit loans and other sorts of things. You begin to understand why the African American community is in the condition that it's in.
It's interesting because when you were talking about your realization with reparations and how being black, was an injury in itself, right? And you could be in a certain class and you could...
No, hold on. Racism is an injury in and of itself. I just want to be really clear about that.
Oh, sorry. What did target? I meant how it was... I just confused those two things. How being...
No. I think actually it's a really, really important point, because I think oftentimes the way we discuss this, we say, well, if you're black, you suffer from such and such. But I think it's really, really important to say, no. It's the racism that does the thing.
Right. There's nothing inherent.
Blame exactly.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And you actually talk about this a lot in much of your writing, and especially in Between the World and Me, how much that's changed through history. And we have this idea that there's kind of this immutable black identity. And I think it's really interesting the way you talk throughout the book about people who believe they are white. And you look at it at this, you expose these labels as constructions, social constructions, right? But what's interesting is that, and this is something I think a lot of people struggle with, how is it that we, at the same time, acknowledge that these things are constructions, and that they're very much about power? And you even say in one of the interviews I heard you, and you talk about kind of the human condition and how this is kind of, it's a question of power more than anything else. But how do you kind of explain to people, yes, these things are constructions, but they're not inherent, but they're very significant and not meaningless, and that people's lives are shaped by them? Yeah.
Relatively easily. Racism causes injury. Race is a construction. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Racism it's not race that so I think one of the things that we do in this conversation, we say race is a social construct, but we still can have racial problems. That race still can be the basis for great harm. But I think what you need to do is dial it back another level. No, it's not that race is the basis for great harm. Racism. That's the difference. That's the difference. So race is a social construct, but the injury is not done on the basis of race. It's done on the basis of racism. It's very important, and I can, if I'm not being clear, I can, distinguish the two even more if you would like. The notion that we have in our conversation right now is that you have, pure races. So a black race and a white race, and these folks don't get along. Therefore, there is racism. In fact, it's the other way around. There is racism. The exploitation happens first. Slave trade happened before we had any sort of coherent one-drop rule. Folks were trading slaves. That happened first. It's the taking. It's the plunder, but it's always first. And then the sorting comes after to justify the plunder. Right.
So the ideology to support the economic and financial plundering and exploitation, right?
That's exactly it. The classification comes afterwards. And so the ultimate thing that does the damage really is the racism. It's not, the concept of, certain people being darker than other people or certain people being lighter than others. I mean, this is not the basis of anything at all. This has no meaning whatsoever. What has meaning is the desire to take something from somebody and to justify the racism, the white supremacy. Right. That's the basis of harm. This is important, because who was it? Justice Roberts, he said, and liberals get caught on this, he said, in that Supreme Court case, I think it was striking down some sort of affirmative action, and he says, the way to stop discrimination is to stop discriminating. Well, that's frankly ridiculous. A large part of government's job is to discriminate. Social Security is discrimination. You know what I mean? Some people get it. Some people don't. The problem is not, discrimination. It's racism. That's the problem. That's the problem. It may be fair to discriminate on behalf of, folks we've named black, or not. But racism, which is a very, very different thing, is the problem.
Right, and that was the decision that Sotomayor wrote that brilliant thing about in her dissent, where she talks about how the solution to ending racism isn't pretending that racism doesn't exist.
Right, yeah.
I have to find that, but that was amazing. But what was interesting before I made that big blunder that provoked this interesting conversation.
You didn't blunder. You didn't blunder.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
You didn't blunder.
No. Oh, thank you. That's. I'm going to put that on my website.
Out, man.
As blurb.
No.
Yeah, it's true.
You were making a blunder.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That's so nice. I'm just intimidated because you don't think this, but we all think you're a genius. The three of us in this room. So, okay, I just took a deep breath.
And humble.
This is partly why.
He's a humble G.
No, but this is partly. Thank you, but this is partly why I reject the label, because it's a done thing. Like, is it like
right,
you have to have those sorts of conversations to get to that sort of clarity. It's not like you wake up and you say, "Aha." It's racism. I got it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's complicated. It takes work to get to it. And I think like the label genius and all these other things connote some sort of inherent something or other, which is just BS.
Right.
Just my little thing.
Not,
there it is.
Not big fans of the bell curve. Over here.
No.
Right.
No,
No. Exactly. My mom, I think, went to City College with him. He started out on the left.
Wow, ain't that something?
Yeah.
All of them did.
I know.
So many of them did.
So many of the neocons, they have like some kind of PTSD from Marxism or something that sends them to the other side.
Either that or he was eating a lot of paint chips that were made out of lead.
That's true, too. In New York, yeah, it's true. But what's interesting is when you talked about the kind of the trap of racism and how you are kept in a certain position that even money can't buy you out of, right? In a literal sense, with the housing example. It made me think so much about your friend Prince Jones and how that he kind of personified a very policy-based discussion that we're having, in that he, as you said, he was the exemplary, worked twice as hard, his mother was a doctor, and he was born again, he had gone to Howard, and in the end, that didn't matter.
Right.
And he was able to be killed and mistaken with a man who was way shorter than him and way heavier, right? So it's not like they even fit the same description. And, of course, the ultimate, it's not an irony, actually. It's a totally consistent thing. But some people would see it as an irony, is that the policeman who killed him was himself black.
No, I think that's not ironic at all.
No, that's no,
no.
It's
I'm agreeing with you.
Right. That to me seems kind of like the personal example of the policy that we're talking about in terms of how kind of deforming racism is. That had happened before you wrote the case for reparations, correct?
Yes.
So you kind of understood that on a personal level before you did on a policy level. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's probably, but I didn't understand it. I just knew that there's something really, really wrong that happened. I didn't understand it. I couldn't have explained it the way, I explained it in the book in no way. No, it had happened and I was in pain. But that's about as far as I could take it.
Got it, right. I mean, there's so much in your book that's really moving and heartbreaking. And that, knowing that you go through the expenses that his mother paid and went through. And it's not to...
Well, I try to imagine.
You imagine, right. Sorry, yes, right. Yeah. And it's not that you're kind of monetizing your friend or turning him into some kind of object. But there was something about the mundane aspect of that was especially heartbreaking, because it's just something we kind of don't think about. Just the investment that parents put in their children and then having them taken away from them. And you...
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
That's how when you're trying to get somebody to feel it, that's how you do it. You try to take those little details of life that folks, look over and show how it, comprises a human being.
Right. And how much of this, you talk about a lot about how much your kind of understanding of the world changed with the birth of your son. And you talk about this this anecdote from the Upper West Side, and I have to apologize because I am from the Upper West Side. Although,
okay.
when I was growing up there,
you.
thank you. When I was growing up there, it was a little bit less bougie than it is now. A little bit less yuppified. But you described this white woman pushing your son, who at the time is a toddler, I believe?
Mm-hmm.
And saying, come on, or something, right? And you have an interaction with her, and then you feel guilty about it. Can you just set this up a little bit? And then, for the listeners, you thought that you kind of lost your cool a little bit? And my question for you is, like, what is the correct response to something like this?
I mean, that was what I was trying to get across more than anything. I mean, I don't know if there is, right?
Right.
I can't tell you that there is one. We were coming down the escalator, and she pushed my son, and I couldn't understand how anyone would get it in their head that it was correct to put your hands on a child like that. Like, when somebody else, I just didn't. It was beyond my capacity to understand it. So we got into a little bit of a shouting match, and I think what bothered me more than anything was not the shouting match that we got into, but there was a man who was standing off to the side and clearly could only see, this big black dude, yelling at this, much smaller white woman. And he jumped into the middle of it, and I was watching it, and I guess what bothered me was, he should have been defending my son.
Right, especially if it's about vulnerability, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a fair world, he would have been defending my son. But he wasn't. And so it was, and then he said, I could have, because I pushed him. We got really into it. I pushed him. He said, I could have you arrested. And that was like when I really felt like, I had put my kid in danger. Even in my response, I'd put him in danger.
Right. And you say, I have told the story many times, not out of bravado, but out of a need for absolution. I have never been a violent person, even when I was young and adopted the rules of the street. Anybody who knew me knew it was a bad fit. I've never felt the pride that is supposed to come with righteous self-defense and justified violence. So how do you go about, I mean, this is just as an example, what is the way that you would have, in retrospect, responded? I mean, and you said that there's no correct response, so maybe the question isn't even about that. It's about, how do we make a world where stuff like this doesn't even happen? I mean, that may sound kind of Pollyanna-ish, but...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was sort of the point of putting that in there. I mean, it's a trap.
Right.
It's a trap. It's a puzzle. How do you get out? I don't know.
And it reminds me of what you said also in Between the World and Me. You're writing, obviously, you're addressing your son. You say, you cannot forget how much... You have to make your peace with the chaos. But you cannot lie. You cannot forget how much they took from us and how they transfigured our very bodies into sugar, tobacco, cotton, and gold. Which I thought that was like such a beautiful sentence. But is that the struggle every day? How does one do those two things at the same time?
I'm sorry, which two things? I'm not.
Oh, sorry. The making your peace with the chaos without forgetting.
Well, I think like those two things aren't actually in conflict. I mean, you don't make to make your peace is not to say, I'm okay with this. It's to say that this is the condition of the world.
Right.
And it might not be, I might not have it, enough power to really change it, but I have to live, and I have to remember how the chaos came about.
Right. And I don't know if you're a fan of Eduardo Galeano at all, but that. Or if you've read The Open Veins of Latin America.
I didn't.
I think there's something, a lot of your writing when you write about history reminds me of his. He's very lyrical and poetic and has this kind of beautiful mix of personalizing history and imagining the personal history. Open Lanes of Latin America. That's actually the book that Hugo Chavez gave to Obama. I don't know if you remember that. And it became like a big...
I do remember that.
Yeah, that's what it was,
I do remember that.
And he's like especially beautiful in the original Spanish. But, Gabe, did you have another question about DC?
No.
No.
I want to talk about comic books.
Oh, yeah, go.
That's what I want. Ta-Nehisi, what's going on with the Black Panther?
I'm writing it.
That's amazing. I have a question for you. What makes him compelling to you? What's one... Like, of all the characters, why Black Panther?
Well, it wasn't my choice. They asked me, did I want to write Black Panther, and it went from there. I hadn't really read any Black Panther books. I had to go back, over them and, try to get an education. I spent much of the summer trying to do that. But no, they asked me to do it. That was the reason I did it.
All right. Okay. I mean, do you want to keep it under wraps until it comes out? Is this?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. That's cool. No. Well, I'm really looking forward to your take on him. That's all. You've been in my head for like the last couple weeks. I have Between the World and Me on Audible. I just finished it. So. To see that you're going to be doing a comic book, and I'm a huge fan of those.
When you've mentioned how you feel kind of an absence of this burden and weight when you're in other countries.
Yes.
You said this to Jon Stewart, for instance, and you very kind of critically said that you realize that there are other people in those countries who don't have that status.
Right.
In other words, they kind of feel the weight and burden that you are relieved of.
Right.
I was wondering if you could kind of explain or elaborate on which people you're talking about, and also if you think that will change the more time you spend there.
I think it'll change the better my French gets.
Ah,
that
right.
My pick.
Right. So
I got to keep some of that American edge to it.
So you're taken as American before anything else when you're abroad. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, most certainly. And so I think I don't know that seems pretty ordinary. The basic idea is as I said, racism is a thing, and so it's a history. It's a done thing that really, really punishes people, and so like when you go to France, like you are not the people with whom they you are not the people that they plundered.
Because they think, right.
It actually is different. You are, from the colonies.
Right.
And, that is not an original thought. Folks who, come from the continent or come from the Caribbean, they say the same thing about, their attitudes towards America tend to be very different than African Americans. It doesn't necessarily mean that one thinks that the society is without racism. But it's different. It's just different.
Do you think that there's also a specificity in terms of how incredibly armed the state is in the United States?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. That's that's different. Because what I'm talking about is like the specificity of the sin of what was done. But at the same time, what you said is correct. It basically is. The kind of violence that attends racism here,
right,
is very, very different because of the presence of guns. They just, physically, I don't worry for my child in the same way.
Right. Like, I've spent a lot of time in Spain for various reasons, but they'll say things that they don't say here about, like the Moors. They actually still use that word. Some people,
right.
But
right.
and I'm not whitewashing or sugarcoating it, but they say very offensive, problematic things. But again, I think that, and my friends who I know who have traveled in Spain who are black have talked about how much safer they feel there, even if people will say things to their face that most people here wouldn't say.
No, because the guns change everything.
Right.
The guns just change everything. And what I was trying to say is it's important not to avoid any sort of fetishization.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because the feeling is not like you've reached some non-racist utopia. Listen, France is just a place that I like.
Right. Right.
And that's it.
Right.
That pretty much it is not an escape. It is not a as I said, a post-racist retreat. It's a place I like. I like New York, by the way.
Right.
I love New York. I adore New York. That does not mean that I think that there's no racism in New York when I say that.
Right. Like Eric Gardner happened in New York, right?
It happened in New York.
Right.
Yeah, that thing.
It happened in New York, right.
Which is, very disturbing. That was I couldn't get over that. Even though I know that's, like you said, in one of the parts of the book you talked about, actually the part that we were just talking about how you, when that man said to you that you could get arrested, that he could have you arrested, and you said, I could have you arrested, he said, which is to say, quote, one of your son's earliest memories will be watching the men who sodomized Abner Louima and choked Anthony Baez, cuff, club, tase, and break you, end quote. Which is, so I couldn't, it's kind of funny that, not funny, it's interesting that something like the Eric Garner case was shocking, even though we've seen such a history, even in, progressive New York City, of impunity towards the police.
Right.
The perpetual state of blaming the victim, regardless of how many scenarios that has been presented.
Oh, right, because Eric Garner, I liked when they pretended it was because he was out of shape.
Out of shape. He was asthmatic.
Right.
He shouldn't have been He shouldn't have been selling cigarettes. Whatever the case, it was always the fault of the victim.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us. We know how incredibly busy you are, and we're so excited that you came on the show. And we're going to encourage our listeners to go and donate, and they will get a copy of your book, which I'm sure will cause them to be flooding the lines. Anything you want to say in the last minute that we have you for? Anything you want to tell readers? Anything you want to tell listeners?
No, thank you for having me, and thank you those who, have read the book. And those of you who have not read the book, it's okay.
You offer them absolution? You offer them absolution?
You don't have anything
Oh, I want to know something.
A lot of reading to get done.
You talk about taking French in school and how it was so you didn't understand why, and of course, coming full circle now, it is kind of justice that you did, right? Why not Spanish?
Because my wife liked Paris.
Ah, okay, got it.
My wife really like Paris,
Right.
Yeah, no, same thing. I mean, it's just, it's just a place.
Right. Okay, and your son's French, you said, is pretty good? I heard you say that. Okay, yeah. Great.
Getting better.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Great, you too.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh my gosh, guys, that was Ta-Nehisi Coates. Kind of amazing. You have heard him speaking on the Katie Halper Show, and you have the chance to donate to the Katie Halper Show and get his book.
Get his book? Yeah.
Get his book. I mean,
Chase,
he was just so nice, by the way, besides being, I'm not going to call him a genius because he doesn't like that.
Humble genius.
So humble.
And soft-spoken, but profound.
Profound, yeah.
Nonetheless.
So you're definitely going to want to call up.
212-209-2950. And once again, for a pledge of $120, you can get the book Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And or if you want to get that book as well as Chasing the Scream, which is also done by another brilliant author, Johan Hari, well, you could get both books for a pledge of $150. 212.
Such a great deal.
It is. I said, that's why I looked at you. You're a mad woman.
I know.
You're crazy. Yeah, you're out your mind.
I know.
212-209-2950 or go to give2wbai.org on the web. Once again, for a pledge of $150, you can get Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates and Chasing the Scream by Johan Hari.
And we'll be talking to Johan Hari next week.
That's going to be crazy, too.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
Wow,
yeah.
That's, good job. I think good job on that one.
Great
really
book
good
package,
job on that.
yeah.
But really, listeners out there, this is one of the reasons why you should support WBAI Radio, because really, you're not going to get this anyplace else but here on WBAI. Like, Gabe, rattle off the list of people that was on this show already.
Oh, we had Margaret Cho. We had Ava Farkas. We had Judah Friedlander. We had Ted Alexandro. We just did Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yeah.
Yeah, great
wow.
guest. Yeah.
That's
Emily Nussbaum's coming on.
Oh, can't
Erin
wait.
Carmone to talk about Notorious RBG.
Oh.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Some great
Okay.
people lined up. Ali. Garib.
Yeah.
He went to high
Ali
school with
Garib.
Gabe, yeah.
Oh, he was
yeah,
here when
yeah.
I was out of
Yeah.
town.
Oh yeah, that's
Right,
right. That's
right.
right. That's right.
Justin Williams also sat in
Justin
once.
Williams.
Justin
Great, yeah.
Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is on a short amount of time that you've been on.
Right.
I mean, and you're going to
It's just gonna
continue
keep
on.
going. Yeah,
and you're going to
just gonna
continue
keep
on
going.
with that narrative. So, as we progress on to the next program, please consider becoming a financial supporter to this radio station. Once again, real fast, 212-209-2950, or go to give2wbai.org on the web. Whatever you can pledge is great, but what we are offering during this hour is the book the Between the World and Me,
By Ta-Nehisi Coates.
by Ta-Nehisi Coates.
And for for $30 more, you get a double package of that and Chasing the
Two
Scream.
great books for a small pledge, relatively small pledge of $150. 212-209-2950, or go to give2wbai.org on the web, and really show your appreciation of the efforts, and because believe me, behind the scenes, Katie drives me crazy every time. She gives me so much information. I'm just like, I'm drowning in information. And she somehow makes it coherent here. 212-209-2950. And give to WBAI.org on the web. The next show is coming up. Any last words, Katie?
No, just check us out on iTunes, SoundCloud. Follow us on iTunes, rate us, review us, and we'll be back next week with talking to Johan Hari.
Okay.
Yeah, tune in next week, 6 to 7.
All right.
Thank you.